Russia launched another massive strike on Ukraine on the night of September 7th. A number of cities came under fire, including Kyiv, Odessa, Dnipro, Kryvyi Rih, and others. For the first time since the start of the full-scale war, a government building was damaged as a result of the attack, Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko stated.
The roof and upper floors. Rescuers are extinguishing the fire. I thank them for their work. We will restore the building, but the lives lost cannot be returned. The enemy terrorizes and kills our people across the country every day.
The Russians also struck residential buildings in the capital of Ukraine.
In the Sviatoshinsky district.
This 9-story residential building in the Sviatoshinsky district was severely damaged. The 4th through 8th floors are partially destroyed. In the Sviatoshinsky district, debris also struck a 16-story residential building. Because of this, a fire broke out on the 15th and 16th floors. In addition, fires broke out in 2 more 9-story buildings due to the enemy attack.
There are fatalities in Kyiv, including 2 women and an infant. In addition to Kyiv, the Russians attacked Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Kryvyi Rih, Kremenchuk, and Odessa. In Poltava region, the occupiers struck the bridge over the Dnipro in Kremenchuk. It is known that the bridge is currently closed. Dozens of explosions were heard in the city itself. In addition, in Zaporizhia, as a result of the occupiers' overnight strike, 16 apartment buildings and 12 private houses, a kindergarten, as well as industrial buildings were damaged. It is known that about 20 people were injured and there are fatalities. There are also reports of Russian strikes on Dnipro and Kryvyi Rih. In particular, according to the State Emergency Service, Russian forces attacked Dnipro and Kryvyi Rih with drones and missiles, resulting in 4 people being injured. Infrastructure facilities, administrative buildings, businesses, private homes, apartment buildings, garages, and vehicles were also damaged. The command of the Air Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported that on the night of September 7th, Russia launched more than 800 Shahed drones and decoy drones, as well as 13 Iskander missiles of various modifications at Ukraine. During the night of September 7th, drones attacked the Russian Federation. One of the major oil industry facilities of the aggressor country, Russia, the Ilyinsky oil refinery, was among those hit. A series of explosions occurred there, followed by a fire. The refinery is located about 360 kilometers from the front line in Ukraine. According to the regional operations headquarters, drone debris fell on the plant's territory, causing a fire at one of the technological units. Reportedly, there were no casualties and the plant's personnel were temporarily evacuated to a shelter. The Ilyinsky refinery is considered one of the key oil processing enterprises in southern Russia. According to Andrei Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation, its annual capacity is about 6 million tons of oil. The plant produces fuel oil, bitumen, gas oil, and other petroleum products. This facility is of strategic importance to the Russian army as it supplies fuel for military equipment, particularly in the southern region and in the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Also on September 7th, the Transneft Druzhba pumping station in Russia's Bryansk region was struck, according to Robert Brody, commander of the UAV forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, who goes by the call sign Madyar.
The facility is strategically important for transporting petroleum products from Belarusian refineries to the Russian Federation, including from the Moser and Novopolotsk refineries.
Earlier, Madyar noted that in August, Ukrainian UAVs put more than 24% of the Russian Federation's oil refining capacity out of operation. He showed a comprehensive list of all the affected objects that were identified. Residents of the Russian city of St. Petersburg have complained about a chemical smell in several areas of the city. The first reports came from the Nevsky district.
Nadibenko, there's nothing to breathe.
Smells like the wiring is burning. At first I thought it was in the apartment. Frunzensky district, Ligovsky.
According to locals, the smell of chemicals and medicine can be sensed in at least the Primorsky Central and Frunzensky districts of St. Petersburg. Residents of St. Petersburg complain that it smells like a mix of nitrile paint and chlorine. According to Fontanka, complaints about the stench started pouring into the emergency service on September 6th around 9 in the evening. Callers reported a smell of burning plastic. So far, the source has not been found. One of the district administrations in St. Petersburg clarified that several measurements had already been taken on Saturday evening. No exceedances of the maximum allowable concentration of pollutants were detected. There is a theory that the chemical smell is coming from the Leningrad region. The light wind is not helping the situation. At the same time, the Environmental Service stated that due to the bad weather, various odors may appear in the near future. The dispatcher of the Mobile Environmental Service also shared the reasons for the chemical smell in the air, according to the Telegram channel Earlier Than Everyone. Because there is no wind, the byproducts of the city's activity accumulate outside and the smell will persist for about 2 days. The unpleasant smell will remain until the 8th. Unfavorable weather conditions and calm winds are to blame, the Duty Environmental Service warned St. Petersburg residents. However, the locals were not satisfied with such excuses.
And what's the connection between the weather and the stench? They modestly kept silent. It feels like they were told to.
Definitely. Which means that something serious and secret must have happened.
Let us recall that at the beginning of summer, St. Petersburg experienced the worst flooding in 160 years. The water level in the Neva remained high for several days. A yellow danger level and a storm warning were declared in the city. Wind gusts reached 25 meters per second, toppling trees and structures. The dams were closed. The water level on the outer side of the dams exceeded 180 centimeters. Ukrainian aircraft may soon appear over Crimea. Ukraine's defense forces have intensified strikes on Russian Federation targets in the occupied peninsula. This was reported on air by Serhiy Brachuk, a representative of the Ukrainian Volunteer Army, on Espresso. According to him,
Crimea has not disappeared from the agenda. Today, the intensification of attacks on Russian targets in occupied Crimea continues. This intensification is, in fact, also part of the response to the so-called Russian summer offensive.
Brachuk added that the armed forces of Ukraine are currently working on eliminating enemy air defense assets, destroying naval targets, and striking ground targets, including strategically important railway hubs. He noted that the phase of depleting the enemy's air defense has been ongoing for quite some time.
With these actions, our AFU units are paving the way for our other means of firepower. I won't talk about the Flamingo and Neptune missiles right now, but the path is being paved. That's why I think that soon. Of course, not tomorrow or the day after, but in time, Ukrainian aircraft may appear in the skies over Crimea, striking ground targets.
Let us recall that recently, in temporarily occupied Crimea, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine struck 2 Russian Mi-8 helicopters and a tugboat. This was reported by the main intelligence directorate. Fighters from the Ghosts unit used drones to strike the Russian occupiers' airbase in Fardiska near Simferopol. It is noted that the estimated cost of the disabled helicopters is between $20 and $30 million. A Russian tugboat was also hit, likely Buk 2190 in the Sevastopol Bay. During the air attack against the occupiers on the peninsula, Ukrainian intelligence operatives directed a warhead at the vessel. Ukrainians' new Flamingo cruise missiles also struck a border outpost and FSB patrol boats. This was reported by the Militarny project, citing sources. The footage captures a triple launch from the Ukrainian coast at dawn. The missiles rose into the air one after another with the help of solid fuel boosters and headed toward their target. According to satellite images, the missiles destroyed the main building of the outpost, and the surrounding area was also damaged by fire. U.S. President Donald Trump stated that he would help resolve the issue of security guarantees for Ukraine. He said this to journalists in the Oval Office of the White House. The American leader emphasized that the war in Ukraine must be resolved peacefully, otherwise the cost will be very high.
There will either be an end to the war in Ukraine, or a hell for which a price will have to be paid. I put an end to 7 wars, and the Ukrainian conflict will face the same outcome.
Trump added that ending this war turned out to be much more difficult than he had thought. The U.S. president stated that he would help Ukraine with security guarantees. At the same time, he noted that Europe would play a key role in this matter. Responding to journalists' questions about security guarantees, Trump said,
"Well, we'll take care of that. We'll help them. Listen, we want to save a lot of lives, so we'll do something about it."
In addition, it has become known that Ukraine and the U.S. are discussing an agreement worth about $100 billion. According to NBC News, citing sources, if a peace agreement is reached, Ukraine plans to use this amount to purchase American weaponry. In exchange, Washington wants access to intellectual property related to advanced technologies that Kyiv developed during the war. Meanwhile, on September 8th, the US and the European Union will meet to discuss new sanctions against Russia. This was reported by the Associated Press, citing an informed source. It is noted that Trump is increasingly frustrated by the lack of progress in achieving peace, and the deadline he set for the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin to reach a peace agreement has already expired. According to the source, Finance Minister Scott Bessent spoke with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on September 5th. The publication writes that representatives of EU countries offered Trump to send their delegates to Washington within 48 hours to create a working group on sanctions against Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky rejected the proposal of the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin to meet in the capital of the aggressor country, Moscow. In response, he stated that Putin could come to Kyiv The head of state said this in an interview with ABC News.
He can come to Kyiv. I cannot go to Moscow when my country is under daily rocket attacks, under assault. I cannot go to the capital of this terrorist.
Zelensky noted that Putin does not want to meet with him. The president of Ukraine has repeatedly stated that he is ready to meet with the Russian dictator in any format, but there has been no response. Therefore, Putin's so-called proposal to hold negotiations in the Russian capital is just another excuse to delay the meeting.
If a person does not want to meet during wartime, of course he suggests something that cannot be acceptable either to me or to others.
Even during the press conference in Beijing, Putin stated that he was ready to meet with the president of Ukraine. According to him, he supposedly never refused a meeting.
By the way, Donald asked me if possible to arrange such a meeting. I said, yes, it's possible. Well, in the end, if Zelensky is willing, let him come to Moscow. Such a meeting will take place.
Putin repeated this point during the Eastern Economic Forum on September 5th. According to him, the best place for the meeting is the Russian capital, Moscow. At the same time, the Russian dictator calls Ukraine's desire to meet on neutral territory an excessive demand. Earlier, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov stated that Putin invited Zelensky to Moscow supposedly for negotiations, not for capitulation. As is well known, despite loud statements, the Kremlin ruler avoids dialogue with the Ukrainian president. A number of world leaders believe that Putin is not ready for a personal meeting with Zelensky.
Fuel has started to disappear in Moscow. According to media reports, there is no AI-95 at gas stations. The same situation is observed in Saratov. Residents complain that they are forced to buy lower quality AI-92. According to the media, fuel has practically disappeared from gas stations in Crimea and Zabaikalsky Krai. Earlier, residents of Primory stated that for the first time since the beginning of the century, they are facing serious problems with gasoline in the region. The regional government explained the fuel shortage by excessive demand caused by tourists who went to the seaside for vacation. Authorities claim that all oil depots in the region have a fuel reserve for 4 to 7 days. Other media report that Russia is on the verge of a gasoline crisis. Since the beginning of the year, AI-95 gasoline has increased in price by 32% and reached a historic high on the exchange. This happened due to an emergency at a refinery, the inability to create reserves, as well as high demand during the summer. Experts are confident that in the near future, record high gasoline prices will impact the prices of retail goods in Russia. Andrei Yusov, a representative of the main intelligence directorate, emphasizes, when it comes to the results of Ukrainian strikes, the situation in the Russian Federation speaks louder than any analysis, particularly the lines at gas stations.
No classified analysis is needed here. All the data and monitoring are open. The number of hits on Russian facilities and their objective documentation are kindly posted and shown by the citizens of the Russian Federation themselves.
Strikes on Russian oil refineries have led to disruptions in oil production and exports, caused gasoline shortages in certain regions of Russia, and have become a response to Moscow's offensive actions on the front and attacks on gas and electricity facilities in Russia. According to Reuters estimates, attacks on 10 plants in the Russian Federation have resulted in the loss of at least 17% of refining capacity, or 1,100,000 barrels of oil per day. On September 8th, the European Sanctions Development Group will travel to the United States to discuss with the U.S. Treasury ways to exert economic pressure on Russia, sources from the Associated Press report. On September 4th, Bild reported that during a call with Trump, European leaders proposed organizing a joint working group with the U.S. within 48 hours to coordinate sanctions. But it was not known how the Americans responded. After that, on September 5th, a phone conversation took place between the head of the European Commission and the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury. The working group will be headed by the EU Special Envoy for Sanctions, David O'Sullivan. Representatives from the White House, the State Department, and the U.S. Trade Representative's Office will also participate in the meeting. The European group will include people who work in energy, financial services, and trade. Earlier, U.S. President Donald Trump accused European leaders of financing the war in Ukraine through purchases of Russian oil and called on them to cut Moscow off from this source of income, as well as to put pressure on China in this regard. As reported by the German tabloid Bild, in response to Trump's accusations, European Commission representative Ursula von der Leyen pointed out that after the start of the war, the volume of Russian oil purchases by EU countries sharply decreased, informing Trump that only Hungary and Slovakia are importing oil from Russia. As noted by Axios, after a video conference with Donald Trump, French President Emmanuel Macron stated that if the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, continues to evade peace negotiations with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, new sanctions will be imposed on Russia in coordination with the United States. US President Donald Trump disagrees with the claim that he is slow to impose tough sanctions against Russia. According to the head of the White House, he has not yet completed either the second or third phases of pressure on Russia.
How do you know that no action has been taken? Would you say that imposing secondary sanctions on India, the largest buyer outside of China, means no action has been taken?
According to Trump, this is costing Russia hundreds of billions of dollars.